Welcome to the ISPC Tailboard Talks podcast. This is episode 28. Hard to believe. For the first time in about 2.5 months or so, we got the sidekick, Mr. Jerry Havens, back in the booth. How you doing, brother?
Man, it is good to be back for a little bit at least.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I think all of us have been crazy on the road since about mid-March. A couple little spurts at home, but yeah, it's been quite the traveling few months here. But I guess that's all good if we're sitting at home and aren't making any money. So,
and I love trade show season. I love doing what I get to do for a living. But I will tell you this, man. April, 5 days home in the whole month of April, and only 3 of them were consecutive. That was a rough month.
Yep.
But I came home in the first week of May and went straight to Hawaii for a week. So I'm happy. Everything's good.
That's tough.
It was horrible. Went to Kauai and got to visit our friends at Kauai Electric and get them set up on the new LMS. They've been using our program for years and years and years, and we got them set up on the new LMS. And what a great group of people. I mean, Kauai Island Electric, if you're listening, thank you for having us out there for a few hours, and it was just awesome hanging out with those guys. And then plus, we got to hang out on the island of Kauai for a week. So
good deal. Yeah, that's tough. I got to hang out in Texas, so
it's like Hawaii, but not.
Yeah, right. For those of you that have heard the last half a dozen podcasts or so, we kind of went through a grounding and bonding EPZ series of episodes. So now we're going to kind of jump back into our more regular podcast format that if you've listened to us for a while, you've kind of known, where we have our little tailboard talk session. And then obviously we have a guest today, and we'll get to a very special guest today. We'll get to that here in a minute.
But you didn't need me anyway. You had Jim Vaughn for what, 5 episodes or so, 6 episodes?
To be honest, I didn't get to talk much either, so it would have really been a struggle if there was 2 of us on here. So, I love it.
I'll tell you what, though. I can listen to Jim Vaughn talk about his stuff all the time.
Hey, I learned just as much as the podcast listeners. Every time I listen to him, I learn something different, or a little tidbit, or explain something a little different. That wasn't a dig at Jim. That's just, when you get Jim going,
facts.
especially on grounding and bonding, man, it's forget it, So, but yeah, it was all good. I hope people got a lot out of that. There was a lot of good information we shared that normally you got to pay several $1,000s to get. So
absolutely.
You got to tune in and hear all that for free. So hopefully maybe you got some of your questions answered, and
if you
Jim
didn't,
and I have gotten pretty well aligned.
If you didn't get your questions answered, you can always email us.
Yep.
Mark at ispconline.com, Jim at ispconline.com.
Yeah, and you can also, our podcast has an email as well. You can do podcast at ispconline.com as well. So
that'd probably be the better place than just you or Jim randomly.
Yeah, there's a couple other people that monitor that one other than just me. So, okay. So today we're going to shift gears just a little. And so today we're kind of talking or navigating the new regulatory landscape. We're going to try to understand what that means for us in the line industry, right? What's changing? What do we got to be aware of? What do we got to prepare for? How are things going to look different down the road? Maybe they won't look different, but I think everybody probably has some questions in the back of their mind about, all right, we want to understand how that affects us, right? How it affects us in our job and our career and so on. So again, we got a very special guest today. We'll get to him in a moment. Jerry, you want to give our old sponsor a shout out here and let everybody know who's doing that today?
Do I? Someplace near and dear to my heart. Today's podcast episode brought to you by T&D PowerSkills. Don't say that. Yes, T&D PowerSkills. Guys, today's safety and training managers need flexible and effective solutions, and that's where we come in. T&D PowerSkills, 78-unit curriculum designed for adult learners. You can customize your training, scale your delivery, and control your costs. I know that's a big bottom line right now. Whether you're training just a few crews or running a full apprenticeship program, visit tdpowerskills.com and learn more. That's tdpowerskills.com, or shoot me an email, jerry@tdpowerskills.com. I'll hook you up with a demo and tell you all the info about it.
Normally we wait till a little bit later in the podcast to do this, but we're going to introduce our guest. I think he can bring some value to the Tailboard Talk as well. So our guest today is Mr. Mike Starner, who is NECA's Executive Director of Outside Line Safety. NECA is the National Electrical Contractors Association. And so welcome, Mike. It's glad to have you back. I think this is your second time back, right?
Well, that's true. Yeah, I'm glad to be here, Mark, Jerry.
You're a regular.
I'm one of the guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Happy to be here. Happy to be here. And what a great timely topic. What's going on in the regulatory environment? I know everybody's got questions. Something our members ask us on a routine basis. What's coming down the pike?
Yeah.
And so, good call.
No, that's good. And we saw this coming right earlier in the year, and talking internally here, we were like, hey, we got to get Mike back on here because as far as in our little world, the training and safety world, I mean, there's nobody better to talk to than you guys at NECA, and you guys have
You specifically.
Yeah. What's that? Yeah, absolutely. And so, today this whole podcast is really just about raising awareness, right? Anything from regulation changes, legislation coming down the pike, stuff that may affect our work practices, maybe safety requirements, all those type of things. So, obviously with the administrative change that happened here in the beginning of 2025, I guess first of all, and I don't want to steal too much of our guest segment with you, Mike, but I guess maybe just at a high level, without diving into the weeds, what's the temperature around Washington, right? Like what's that one thing that kind of has everybody, swarming around the bee's nest, I guess.
Well, every time the administration changes from Republican to Democrat or vice versa, we know there's going to be a change in philosophy.
Yeah.
The Republicans come in and tend to be, a little bit more around smaller government, maybe a little bit more favorable to the employer. And on the other side of the coin, when the Democrats are in House, they're very labor centric, so protecting the worker. Putting in, more safeguards, investing more money, increasing the size of government. So that's really sort of the dichotomy that we're dealing with, and we deal with that every time. But what's different this time is just how dramatic the reductions. We all have heard about, the USAID and the DOGE initiative to go out and look in all the government agencies and identify fraud, waste, and abuse. But beyond that, just where are the opportunities to shrink government?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's different. I think this time we've seen, heck, NIOSH, National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, their workforce, I think, somewhere around 80% in reduction.
Wow.
So you start to think about what that looks like. Some of the research that happens out there, the respirators get certified through NIOSH. NIOSH is supposed to inform OSHA rulemaking with research. And so what does that look like? There's a lot of ancillary activities that happen under the purview of NIOSH that just aren't happening anymore, whether it's grant money, different committee work, committee assignments, and of course, like at the end of the day, this research and things that they do to help support OSHA. So to me, that's the big one, right? The workforce reductions, the pause on funding, and just everybody wanting to see what's going to come next.
Wasn't there talk about even OSHA being defunded a lot, or a lot of it?
Yep. You had someone, I think, is Arizona, congressman from Arizona, introduced a bill to essentially, abolish OSHA. I don't think that's going to get any traction, but it does tell you, where at least that side of the house where their minds are at, like, what authority does OSHA have to regulate the workplace? What authority and how broad is that authority to execute compliance issues, to go out and get involved in the workplace, well above and beyond some might say is just simple, basic occupational safety and health. What jurisdiction and authority has Congress given OSHA to do those things? So it'll be neat to see how it all shakes out. I don't know who has the answer for that, but I don't think we're going to see OSHA go away. But what we are seeing is the reduction through attrition. We had the early outs, if you want to call it that. Anybody in the federal government who wanted to retire early, they gave them a little package to do that. We've seen a lot of OSHA staff take them up on the offer. We've seen some key leadership changes, removals, or folks that remove themselves, early retirements or change of assignments. It's not going to be the same old for us for at least the next 4 years.
Mike, I guess maybe just to finish up the Tailboard Talk segment here, with everything that we just kind of highlighted, maybe a little bit of a two-part question. How does all that affect NECA's ability to support the frontline workforce? And I guess, how do all these changes affect the frontline workforce? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what we're all striving to do, right? Is make sure that our frontline workers, whether you're union, whether you're non-union, no matter, at the end of the day, all of us in kind of, ISPC, TD PowerSkills, NECA, we're all there for the same reason, right? Safety and training. And so, what's that do to that?
Well, I don't think, from an employer's perspective, and I'll pose this way: if you're a conscientious employer who is working hard to develop and maintain a hazard-free workplace, making sure your workers are trained, and you're providing them with the equipment that they need to protect themselves, and you have a safety management program, safety management system in place, I don't think you're going to have any problem.
Mm-hmm.
If you're an employer who is getting away with bare minimal compliance just so that trying to avoid a fine or something like that, and you're not doing all those things, you may think that, hey, now the weight's been lifted a little bit. We're not going to have as much enforcement. OSHA's not going to be breathing down my neck. And some of that might be true just because, the reduction in workforce and the resources OSHA has available. But OSHA's not going away. And that minimally compliant employer is going to have trouble whether OSHA was full strength or not.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's either going to manifest itself in citations, or it's going to manifest itself in injuries or deaths in the workplace. So all OSHA did was provide sort of an entry level, baseline, ground floor level, like we always talk about, minimal compliance issues that employees have a right to a healthy and safe work environment. But what we do as employers is we go above and beyond that. And so, NECA, we pride ourselves as being, an organization that takes contractors who want to drive the industry forward. They want to come together and be like-minded and figure out how to raise the standard. This is an opportunity for us. It's a chance to say, hey, look, we got this. Give us the wheel. We're still going to put programs in place. We're still going to identify trends. We're still going to go out there and develop partnerships and find solutions to problems. If anything, it's almost a call to action for employers, and it's our moment to shine.
Yeah, and I think, probably the key takeaway here to kind of wrap up this little session, you're right, Mike. We talk about it all the time. We talk about it in the trainings we give. We talk about it at the conferences. We talk about it in everything. And that's the need to, one, look after yourself when it comes to safety and training. Two, look after your coworkers. And again, like you said, if you have companies that are at the forefront of that, there really should be no change, because, you have to want to do the right thing, right? If, like you said, if you're a company out there just trying to get by, normally we're going to see you when it comes to an accident investigation or something, because somebody's going to get hurt because you're taking shortcuts and doing that type of stuff. So no matter what's happening, I guess the key point, no matter what's happening in Washington, the line industry's marching orders are the same, right? Safety first,
Right. That's right.
you know, and continue to move forward and get better. So, all right, good deal. Well, let's bring the Tailboard Talk session to a close. Mr. Jury, you want to give another shout out to our sponsor?
Absolutely. Hey, today's episode brought to you by T&D PowerSkills. Hey, if you're responsible for training line workers, you know the challenges and regulations change, crews come and go. Training has got to keep up. That's why T&D PowerSkills is such a game changer. 78 modules built specifically for adult learners, and you can customize your message, scale your training program for quick refreshers, all the way up to a full 8,000 hour DOL certified apprenticeship program. You can manage your costs, whether you're a small contractor or a major utility. It's flexible, it's effective, and it's built for the way you train today. So check us out, tdpowerskills.com. That's tdpowerskills.com.
So, all right. So, jumping into our guest segment, again, we have Mike Starner from NECA that's with us today, I guess, Mike, we've kind of talked about a little bit of this already, and how kind of the new landscape and what that looks like in our Tailboard Talk segment. I guess maybe the next question is, you have a couple of bills out there, or acts, I guess they'd be considered, right? Your Infrastructure Investment and your Jobs Act, and also we got the Inflation Reduction Act. And so how does that, I guess, shape, or maybe if it even does shape, what NECA does to support the workforce, right? Obviously, it affects the contractors and so on doing the work, right? They're trying to get pieces of this pie and get the work and so on. But I guess, how does that affect what you guys do to support these contractors? Does it change anything?
Well, I think it does. I don't think it. What it does is it forces us to be tuned into what's currently happening. So, the act, the Infrastructure Act, when it came out, was very heavy on green energy.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so, some estimates are 70 to 80% of that, the funding associated with that, was tied to green energy. So, solar, wind, electrical vehicle charging stations, some of the interconnections between those energy sources and where the load is. So we saw a lot more high voltage DC transmission coming out there. I don't think that's going away. I think you're still going to see the transmission expansion. I think there's still going to be, I think the HVDC horse is out of the barn. I think we're going to see that as a preferred method of transporting power over long distances in the transmission world. So I don't think that's going anywhere. What might be different is, essentially, Trump has put a hold on any of the funding that's associated with green energy. So all that money that's sitting out there that was, earmarked to go to a certain green energy project is going to be sitting there on pause and may even be taken away. I guess that has to go through Congress. I'm not an expert in that area, but they're put a pause on that, and so the administration has now shifted their focus more to natural gas or nuclear power. You may have heard President Trump in some of his addresses to the nation talk about bringing in more manufacturing into the country, and how part of that discussion is can that manufacturing can they build their own power source? Can they build their own generation on site? So what we're seeing at NECA is a lot more private money coming into the industry. We saw what happened at 3 Mile Island with Google. Google is starting to invest more in apprenticeships, looking at the workforce and developing the trades. So that's a good thing for us. So we want to stay tuned into that and see where those developments happen in real time,
Mm-hmm.
and position, whether it's we're out there asking to get involved in some of this money, or we're trying to help our membership understand the opportunities that are out there, whether it's the lobbying, whether it's putting the business case together and help drive some of those decision makers to the electrical utility industry. All that stuff is just that's real time stuff, Mark. So
Yeah.
It's no different. If we were 2 years ago, we were doing the same thing. Which way's the wind blowing? How can we set up our members for success? How can we have a seat at the table so we're not on the menu, and make sure that there's some of this money is coming to invest in the electric utility infrastructure, and electrical contractors are going to be on the front line of that.
Yeah. So
now, for those of you who don't know, by the way, Google investing in 3 Mile Island, basically their own nuclear power plant to fund their AI, or to run their AI. Right? Am I correct in that? Did I read that right?
Yeah. I mean that's what we're going to see, right? We know the number one demand for load is going to be these data centers, and if we start to see manufacturing coming onshore again, that's going to be a heavy load requirement. And what are we doing to supply load to these places? Well, industry has said, listen, we're not going to wait for the utilities. We're not going to wait for, this arduous process that involves a bunch of middlemen. We're going to go in there and directly buy these power sources, or we're going to build the transmission line, or we're going to build the substation, and it's all going to be done with private money. That's something that's pretty new.
And I think Facebook or Meta is doing that in Louisiana, with their in North Louisiana with their data center that they're doing. They are building the transmission lines to connect into Entergy's grid system. So they're becoming responsible for that end of it as well. Massive project that everybody in Louisiana is excited about, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and they just made an announcement just this week or last week. There, Amazon is 2 large data center facilities up in Pennsylvania, $20 billion worth of investment. So that brings up a good point here. So again, this is probably maybe a 2-prong question for any or all of us. So one, obviously, we have the concern of trained workers, right? And we've been talking about it. I think, Mike, we talked about it the last time you were on the podcast a year ago, right? And to my knowledge, nothing has changed. We're, 50, 60,000 workers short, trained workers short, right? To be able to, back then we were talking about all the green energy potentially coming onto the grid and so on. And we're like, well, how are we going to do this, right? We don't have trained people to do this work. And so, obviously, the answer for sure isn't untrained work. We got to figure out a way to get these folks in the proper channels and get them the training they need to be, and get them into the line work field. And so, let's start with that one, and then I'll tackle the second half of my question. But so, from NECA's standpoint, obviously you guys are concerned with the current workforce and making sure they're being trained and continuing education and all that kind of stuff. But what are you guys doing, if anything, as far as, how do we attract people to this industry, right? It's obviously a very well-paying industry, right? But it's also a very difficult industry, right? When things go haywire, when storms and all that kind of stuff and the power's out, now you're working long days, extended hours, long periods away from family, all of that. How do we get people to say, hey, I want to be a lineman?
Yeah, I mean that's the trick, right? Is what's the pipeline look like? And you mentioned the current shortage, so we're starting off in the hole.
Yeah.
And our projections are telling us that over the next 10 years, we're probably going to see somewhere around the neighborhood of 200,000 electricians, whether it's line workers or inside wiremen. We're going to see that workforce shrink by another 200,000.
Wow.
Right. So to your point, what's the pipeline?
Yeah.
How are we reinforcing this? What are we doing that's innovative? Now, the good news is in our world, we don't see necessarily an apprentice problem. We have guys beating at the door to get involved. So that's not a big deal. Our problem is putting them to work. Our problem is getting them hot time, getting them developed so that they can go out there and add value on the crew.
Mm-hmm.
I think we had last year we had somewhere around 113,000 apprentices waiting for work, whether that's inside what we call inside wiremen or journeyman linemen. both sides of the industry, we've got apprentices. We're having trouble putting them to work. But that's not to say that we need to not think at all about where the pipeline is. So we do a lot. We have a program called VEAP where we reach out and try to connect with veterans and try to give them a pathway. We go and talk to them while they're still serving. We talk about opportunities that exist as line workers, and if they pass the requirements and they're successful getting into the program, they go to a line school. They spend some time at the line school, and then we get you out into an apprentice. And different apprenticeships offer different ways of direct access, but traditionally it's somewhere around second step, second or third step. You're coming into an apprenticeship ready to hit the ground running, and then you're just looking to get your hot time and develop a little bit more and get the hours that you need. But it's really about once we have these apprentices, what are we doing to develop those guys and gals that are out there trying to learn the trade? And what makes it tough for contractors is we have to bid our work in a way that we're as lean as possible, right? We don't want to have any waste. We don't want to have any fluff. We want to send out just the amount of equipment that we need, just the amount of people that we need.
Yeah.
And if I can send 2 journeyman linemen versus a journeyman lineman and 2 apprentices, it makes sense for me because I'm going to knock the job out faster because I got somebody who's proficient and competent. Yeah. But we're not developing those cold apprentices into hot apprentices. So, it's a byproduct of how we bid work and how we go after work. And so, I always say, for the utilities listening, meet us in the middle somewhere and help us develop the workforce and recognize that we have this problem with getting guys the time that they need to develop, because if we're not developing journeyman linemen, we're not building crews. Yeah. If we're not building crews, we're not taking more work. And so it's just a bigger problem. So we all have a shared interest in that. Yeah. It's just recognizing, what that pipeline looks like. Yes, we have people knocking at the door. We got to get them through the program. We have to figure out where we can place them. We have to get them in positions where they can get their hot time, and then we can produce a journeyman lineman. The other problem we have is, we talked about this before, I think too, just the bench strength of the crew. The composite of a crew now, you get, you add up everybody's time. It's not the same as when we came up. Yeah. You got folks that the foreman on the crew has 8 years, and the journeyman had just topped out, and then you got a couple apprentices, maybe a growman. Yeah. That ain't the way we came up. Yeah. So we have to reinforce that.
I know we talked before the last time about the need for the utilities to work with the contractors, and now they're being forced because of demand to just push the gas pedal even further towards the floor because people are screaming they need more power, right? These data centers and stuff, and ultimately, you mentioned. Or you and Jerry were talking about, now you have these big, mega corporations that are coming in and saying, well, if you can't do it, we'll just run our own power lines. Ultimately, there's got to be a connect into the grid. But so now you're even fast forwarding more, right? Technology's moving faster than I guess you would call it the dinosaur of the utility, right? Where do we crash into the brick wall and say, okay, hold on a minute here. We got to start all working in the same direction. Just from what we talked about here in the last 10 minutes, I don't see the way we're currently navigating this problem. I don't see that we come out with a favorable result. Do you I don't see the problem fixing itself, right? Unless something changes, right? Does that have to be something regulatory? Does that have to be something, can it be worked out by, committee, that type of thing? I don't see how you navigate that successfully without some sort of intervention by something.
Yeah, no, you're right. I don't know what the answer is. Hopefully somebody listening to this can chime in, put in the notes or whatever it is. But we've got this immovable object.
Yeah.
The data center, the load is coming. Even if you took the data centers out, just if we're getting all this manufacturing come back into the U.S.
Yeah.
and we already have, this, it's going to be reduced, but the electrical vehicle market and, the load that one of those electric vehicle charging stations, demands, and, just new construction, whether it's residential and industrial, commercial, you lay on top of that this data center load and heavy manufacturing, and it's just, that's going to happen, right? And so that's all commerce, right? That's making money.
Yeah.
That's going to happen,
Yeah.
right? As much as we want to sit here as safety professionals and say, slow your roll.
Yeah.
We do it. We got to do it methodically. We got to make sure we got our ducks in a row. Make sure we don't get anybody hurt. Industry is not going to stop. So then it's like, well, what's going to be, what's the sacrificial lamb in that? We don't want that to be people,
right?
So if it's not people, how do we build safeguards around the people so that when they're operating in these high risk environments that are error likely, now that we've talked about all these stressors coming in, time pressures, work demands, scheduling, customer requirements, all those pressures, what are we doing collectively to wrap our arms around our workers? And that could be, making sure your project management team is looking at the work plan and identifying anything that could possibly go wrong early on, identifying that as a potential pain point, and then building some controls in there.
Yeah.
And, what are we going to do if this outage doesn't go on time? What are we going to do if the material doesn't show up on time? What are we going to do if our access to the work location is reduced? And so if we have sort of our plan B, and I would say plan C in mind, that puts us with our best foot forward. And then, what are we doing to give our crews that are operating in real time the ability to make decisions on that job site? Whether that's, okay, here's our work today, here's the scope of work, here's the tasks, here, we'll do our hazard analysis, here are the things that could get us in trouble, here's our controls, here's how we're going to protect ourselves, here's some hold points in the job plan, because this is a critical task, so we don't want to glaze over, we don't want to just cruise control through this critical task, so we'll put a hold point. When we get there, we're going to stop for a minute and we're going to talk. So whether that's stop, think, act, and review, 2-minute drill, stop work authority, all these different human performance tools that we put in place, that's part of it. The other part is, making sure the guys have what they need.
Yeah.
Do they have enough help? Maybe 10, 15 years ago, you could have done this job with 4 people, but we're operating a different scenario today.
Yeah.
And, maybe we need a couple more people. If for nothing else, just to add a little more capacity onto that job site so that we can't fail. Now, that costs money. So who's going to pay for that? And how do we make sure that we can still go out there and run a business, but also keep people safe? And then, what are crews doing at, to sort of debrief themselves after a job to make sure that they're documenting all the things that could be improved upon? Because it's going to be, all the things in the past we kind of, guys would, maybe, roll their eyes about or say that's silly or that's, you're being a safety nerd. Those things, buddy, we're going to need all that safety nerd stuff over the next couple generations of line workers, I'm telling you.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of good segue into maybe the next talking point. So what are you hearing, if anything, Mike, as far as maybe changes to rules or regulations, anything in that aspect that you're hearing rumblings about that may, to deal with a lot of what we talked about, right? Anything you're hearing out there? Or?
Well, I think most people are familiar with President Trump's philosophy on regulation. Any new regulation that you introduce, I want you to take 10 away.
Yeah.
Right. So he wants to shrink regulation. He doesn't want to add more to it.
Yeah.
That's in contrast to the previous administration. So the previous administration had an executive order that went out to all the regulatory agencies and said, you need to look at your regulatory agenda. Anything that can be related to climate change, anything that can be related to underserved populations or underrepresented populations, that needs to rise to the top. And that's why, in the regulatory agenda during the last administration, you saw things like the heat standard, right, tied to climate change, indoor and outdoor settings. So looking a lot of like agriculture, underrepresented populations working in the agricultural environment or construction labor environment. You started to see, the rule on emergency response. Emergency response is an update to the fire brigade standard, but it expanded to include sort of like natural disasters, right? So here's that climate change theme being woven in. So that was the emphasis. Go into your regulatory agenda, find all these opportunities for us to really drive climate change. And you saw that with the EPA, you saw that with DOE, you saw that with the Department of Labor. So that's changed, right? So that's stopped. So now the new executive order is let's get out there and let's focus our money on energy. Now that doesn't translate too much for occupational safety and health. So you're going to see, I think, regulatory wise, you're going to see permitting, some relief in permitting. You're going to see some relief when it comes to environmental issues. But with safety and health, I think what you're going to see is sort of just a pause, like a slow it down. Let's reduce our activity. And so the rulemaking's underway for heat stress. We're all kind of waiting to see how that shakes out. Actually, I testified to OSHA hearing next week, and OSHA is going to take public comments about what direction they should go in. The Small Business Administration has been having hearings associated not just with Department of Labor, but with environmental protection, DOT, Department of Energy. So they're looking at it too. Like what's the voice of the customer say? So you're going to start to see, I think, these regulatory agencies looking at their current agenda. They're going to be marching to the drum of the administration, what they want to see. They're going to be looking inwards and saying, okay, what can we give up? What can we either not do at all, or maybe can we change some of the aspects of it to make it more favorable to the current administration? And I think that's what you're going to see with heat. This is my opinion. I think you're going to see, the heat standard, the way it's written, change dramatically. I think it's going to end up being a more of a water rest shade type standard, more performance-based, less specific requirements. And so that would be an example. The emergency response standard, I think that goes away. I think that gets put on hold or withdrawn, and maybe it comes back to life later, but I don't think so. Some of the others, as far as just kind of keeping the wheels turning and the trains running kind of stuff, some of these updates that need to happen to standards, I think that's going to go. I think that's going to be routine rulemaking. I think that continues. I think you'll see some of the more controversial ones that the administration, if you want to say, the more conservative administrations would like to see go away. The improved record keeping rule that had to do with high risk industries providing all of their logs. I think that goes away. I think what you see from, let's see what else is out there. You got that one. And the worker walk around rule, if you're familiar with that one, that was the rule that was put out there to say, hey, a third party can walk around through the inspection with the OSHA compliance officer, and it can be anybody that a worker chooses, not necessarily a representative. So that might be somebody like an engineer, or maybe an industrial hygienist, or somebody that would really add value to the OSHA inspection because that they're there. But another thing that it does is it opens up an opportunity for maybe like a union organizer walking around during an OSHA inspection and walking around and doing what they do. So, I think that one goes away. I think you'll see. I think you'll see kind of a pause. I think once we get through these next couple that are out there, I think you'll see things slow down and OSHA really just get into compliance assistance mode.
Let's shift a little bit to work, Mike. We kind of hammered on the regulatory stuff here, but we've talked about through the podcast here, the complexity of work and these data centers and all this type of stuff becoming more complex, right? We're not just going out and putting lines up in the air and so on. How's that change the role of the contractor, right? Or does it change the role of the contractor, right? I mean, we have these, and I guess, this is a pretty wide road here, because, I mean, you got contractors, you can talk about your Quantas, your Michaels, all the big ones in the world, right? And then you got all those smaller contractors that are just trying to get a little piece of the pie. So what does all this work, complexity of work change, influx of work, what's that do to the contractor out there moving forward?
Well, I think overall it's a good thing, right? It's there's going to be a lot of work coming. I don't think the volume of work is going to slow down at all.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see just as much work. I think some of the projects are going to shift. So if your work is centered around building windmills or solar farms,
Yeah.
maybe that reduces a little bit. But if you've diversified yourself, and you mentioned the big companies, that's what the big companies are trying to do, is diversify not just the scopes of work, but the markets that they work in, and try to spread the love so that they're always successful somewhere.
Yeah.
The smaller contractor's not going to be as successful with that, right? So the smaller contractor that has like a niche, if they're doing traditional transmission work, they're good to go.
Yeah.
I mean, transmission work is green light go, all hands on deck.
Yep.
If you're doing any kind of substation generation, facilities type work, I think you're in good you're in good shape there too. I think even distribution, overhead distribution, they're still going to be, we're looking at reliability. They're still going to be looking at resolving, clearance issues. They're still going to be looking at, maintaining the distribution system. But I think you'll see an uptick in undergrounding, so, that ties into reliability. That ties into removing the electrical hazard from the open air environment. That ties into expansion. So I think if you're in the underground business, I think you're in good shape. If you're a technical contract, a specialty type contractor that does things like cable splicing and termination, I think you're in good hands.
Mm-hmm.
But if you put a bunch of your money in these like electric vehicle charging stations, EVSEs, and now you're starting to see some of this money dry up, this grant money funding that, a lot of that was supposed to be installed along, highways.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe at a rest stop, the government was going to put in these stations, or maybe, alliances with, local utilities or something like that to put them in certain places, or community centers, shopping centers, shopping areas, things like that. I think that slows down a little bit. So all that to say, I think if you've diversified what you do for a living, I think you're going to be in good shape, and you'll be able to respond to the peaks and valleys. If you're all in on green energy, you may be thinking about, what else can I get myself into?
Yeah. No, good. All good points. And makes perfect sense. So, all right. Well, last question I have, or topic to kind of touch on, and really it's just, kind of your opinion, Mike. With everything we've talked about today, work, regulatory, the whole ball of wax, uh, what what message would you give to, um, whether it's the field workers, the field crews, the contractors, um, kind of what's your message, or maybe your slash NECA's message, when it comes to, navigating what's coming down the pike, right? Like what should what should those people be focusing on, right? We kind of talked a little bit about, when it came to safety, in the tailboard talk, but, what would you say to that worker or contractor that come up to you and said, "Hey, where's the train heading, and do I want to be on it, or do I want to be off it?" Right?
Right. Well, first thing I'd say is hop on the train. We're full steam ahead. We're going to make some money, and we're going to have a good time doing it. My cautionary statement is, it's not business as usual.
Yeah.
It's error, throwing out phrases that we use all the time, but it's an error likely situation. We're going to be operating in a way that that we're at risk.
Yeah.
And it's all of it. It's the pressures from the customer, it's the internal pressures we have to bid work and meet deadlines. It's going to be the pressures on the crew to be able to get work done and do it safely and do it efficiently and build a quality product. So my advice is look at your organization. Everybody who touches the final product, and everybody in from the first person who bids on the job to the last person who closes the job out. Every person in your organization who touches that process, what help do they need?
Yeah.
Do you have enough people in your project management team and are they equipped to identify things that can cause problems later on down through the project?
Mm-hmm.
Your operational leadership team, your superintendents and your general foreman, what are they doing to set the tone? Are they identifying what the mission is? What's the goal? How are we going to get to the goal? What is it going to take to meet that goal? And then building in a way to give this work, to set these expectations for these guys in a way that they can not just deliver on their best day, but they can deliver when they're having a bad day. And so, does it mean looking at my field leadership to crew ratio, right? Do I have 5 crews for every general foreman? Do I have 10 crews to every general foreman? How much distance does my general foreman have to travel to go see crews? Because honestly, guys, that field leadership, being present on a job site, is the biggest asset we have to make sure that a job goes well.
Yeah.
And so what are we doing there? What are we doing to make sure that the workers feel empowered, that they have a voice and that they're recognized as the expert of work and they can help solve problems for us? How much do we tap into those guys to find the solutions? We need a new piece of equipment. We need to change our PPE. We need to develop a new process. Whatever that is, the employee should be in the front row seat with that stuff, instead of just pushing it down. And then, what are your support organizations? Your fleet people, your safety and health organization, if you have occupational health people, all those people that help you get across the finish line, what do they need? Because if they're pressured and they're stressed, they're not going to perform well. So, the term that gets thrown out nowadays, the all of government approach, I turn it into all of industry approach. You can say all of your organization approach. Look at everything that touches your work and what are you doing to make sure that happens the way it should happen.
2 quick points I want to touch on here before we wrap this up. And so one, that whole thing, when you talk about leadership and kind of managing the frontline folks, everybody has to be on the same page there, right? A lot of people feel that kind of falls to the frontline supervisor or the field supervisor or the foreman on the job, whatever the case. And you make a good point that those folks need to be out there with their crews. They need to be visiting them. They need to be supporting them. They need to be available whenever to support those crews. And I know when I was a supervisor, senior leadership would say that out of one side of their mouth, and then out of the other side of their mouth, they're like, "Oh, give that duty to the field supervisor. The field supervisor can handle that." Oh yeah, and so you're getting so much work on one side, you don't have time to get in the field. Yet if you don't get that work done, then you're looked upon negatively, right? And then on the other side, coming out the other side of the mouth was, hey, you got to get out there and spend more time with your crews. You need more observations. You need, everybody's got to realize that sometimes when you're putting stuff out there that you think is going to help the situation, right? Whether it's another safety observation or whatever the case may be, sometimes all you're doing is cluttering up the process even worse, right? Everybody's got to be working and talking together to make sure that happens. And then the last point is just you got to, as a worker, and I know this used to, get some of my guys and probably me a little too, is the self-internalized pressure that we put on ourselves, right? You have folks out there that are very focus-driven, goal-oriented, goal-driven, and they put so much pressure on themselves because they think that's what their supervisor or their manager or their director is expecting of them, that, it just creates a whole nother ball of problems that we didn't really discuss today, and we won't get into that today. That's probably another podcast for maybe stress and mental health or something to that nature. But it's another real problem out there, is the unspoken pressures we put on ourselves and our coworkers, right? By just expecting people to do things that sometimes are not the best approach, let's say, to the work. So yeah. All right. Well, believe it or not, we're kind of at our hour already. I know, Mike, you did a lot of the talking. So, but any case,
we like guests like that.
Yeah, that makes it easy on me when I can just ask the question and Mike runs with it. That's always a good thing. Sometimes we got to pry it out of people. So, all right. Well, Jerry, why don't you give one last shout out to our sponsor?
Yeah, today's episode has been brought to you by T&D PowerSkills, a 78-unit course curriculum that gives you total control of your line worker training. Customize the training content to match your specific needs and deliver it your way. Whether you're doing short refreshers or managing a full DOL certified 8,000-hour apprenticeship program, best of all, you can scale the program to fit your operation no matter the size. It's trusted by utilities, contractors, municipalities, associations nationwide. Visit tdpowerskills.com. See how you can take control of your training. Become a control freak. T&D PowerSkills program, tdpowerskills.com. The views and opinions shared in this podcast are the personal viewpoints of the participants and may not necessarily reflect the stance of the Institute for Safety and Powerline Construction or its staff. It is highly advised to consult your company management before implementing any actions or policy changes. Please support the sponsors bringing all this to you by visiting their website, checking out their sponsor messages, and for more episodes of ISPC Tailboard Talks, subscribe on your favorite podcatcher. Be sure to leave a review. We would love to hear from you. That also goes for questions, comments. If you have suggestions for episodes that you would like to see, shoot us an email, shoot us a text, get in touch with us. We are all over the net, all over the web, so you can get to us at some point. So please, we'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jerry. Mike, always a pleasure, man. Love talking with you. It's been a while since we've ran into each other, but glad you could take some time out of your busy schedule to spend with us today, and always good to hear your insights and what's going on from the contractor side of things. So thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Well, I can't think of a better way to spend my afternoon talking with some good friends about the industry that I love. So
absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. All right. Until next time, I'm Mark.
I'm Jerry.
Mike, thanks again. We'll see you on the next episode of ISPC Tailboard Talks. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe out there.